Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. I'm here with my old pal, the mighty Laure Jayne Dodd, Forbidden Planet's head book buyer. And today we are blessed to have with us one of Dodd's favorite authors, Laure Eve, the creator of The Graces and the author of the spectacular new book, Blackheart Knights. How are you, Laure?
Yeah, pretty good. Weird to say that right now because everything's on fire, but pretty good. Yes. I feel like I've come off lightly the last year or so, so I have no complaints.
That's good. I mean, it's always good to hear somebody who's got an upbeat experience of navigating through the catastro fuck that has been the last 18 months.
Right, indeed. I mean, it hasn't been, you know, it's affected everybody and we're all just like, yeah, everything's fine. And, you know, there have been moments. But in terms of life catastrophes that could have befallen me, I seem to have skirted those pretty well. So that's great. Yeah, I'm lucky.
Excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, amen to that. Now, as I've intimated a number of times already, Laura's been massively looking forward to this interview and has a bunch of questions for you. So Dodd, over to you, mate.
So where did you come up with the idea for your new book, Blackheart Knights, which I have a proof of here? So woo, it's out nearly. Nearly.
I came up with it. Well, there's a fun answer and a boring answer to this question, isn't there? Always. The funner answer is, and I say this a lot, and it sounds terribly hippie, but this seems to be just the way my brain manifests ideas a lot. I had a dream. It was several years ago. Love my dreams. They're always good mileage. And this one in particular stayed with me. And usually when one stays with me, you know, I know that maybe I can make something out of it. It's caught my interest somehow. And this dream ended up being pretty much exactly chapter 2 of the book. So it was two knights in armor fighting in an arena. And one of them was huge and, you know, overpowering and clearly the favored winner. It's really intimidating and had like a shaved head and he was just really scary. And the other one was much smaller, but they had a helmet on so you couldn't see their face. And they go to it in this dream and the tiny one nearly bests the large one. And the large one is like, what the hell is going on? This is not okay. And he's getting really angry. And so he ends up winning just by basically pinning the tiny one down and then gets so angry that he rips off their helmet and you realize it's a woman. And from that, I really wanted to know who both of them were and why he was so powerful and why she was such a surprise, you know. And that's often the way that I find my way into a story is there's two people in a space doing something. And I just always want to write, I want to know what happens next. I want to write the next bit and I want to know who they are. So that was kind of the genesis of it. That was the seed.
Wow. I mean, I never remembered my dreams. So I'm very jealous of people who do. I just have a happy or dread feeling when you wake up. That's amazing.
That is very interesting, Laura. I always remember my dreams and they're always terrifying. So,
you've said this before. You're more prone to like
suffer badly from night terrors.
Dreams,
night terrors. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, I have some recurring ones and some just ad hoc, as it were. But
me too. Exactly that. Yeah.
Right, and they do specific things. Right, they seem to be some of you can kind of trace to certain fears or anxieties that you're having at the time maybe or something, and and others just seem to I have like this one, this is going a dark turn, but I have this recurring one which seems just designed to make me cry as if I need a physical relief. So whatever happens in the dream makes me cry a lot, not just like sexy weeping, like and I wake up and I'm crying and I always feel fine within a few minutes, but it's almost like my brain is like, you need a release. You haven't cried. Here is a dream to make you do this. It's weird.
And is there a recurring motif in the dreams that make you cry?
No, only that you know, something happens within them, and sometimes it's really silly, you know, like it's an argument with someone or something. But sometimes they're kind of horrible. It's just like a gamut of things. But then I do have other recurring nightmares, which are always the same thing, the same scene in different ways, but it's the same dream. I've had it since I was like a teenager. It's weird.
Very interesting. Let's wheel back for a second, because something Laura and I were talking about earlier on was that we think there's tremendous potential for a graphic novel adaptation with this story. And are there any artists you consider working with, or you'd like to work with on your stories?
Actually, well, that's a good question. Actually, the artist who did the cover is an Italian artist called Federico Musetti, and his artwork for it was so incredible, because obviously they do, you know, it's a larger artwork than you see on the covers. It's a sort of a horizontal spread of this cityscape behind the knight and the bike, and it was just like incredible art. I was like, wow, you know, if he did the whole book, it would look, you know, insanely good. So probably him. I'm not really up on my current comic book artists, I must say, but I used to be a huge fan of, there's a lot of French comic book artists from back in the day, like Mobius, obviously.
Of course.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So if this was a thought question rather than a practical one, one of those. Yeah, screw it.
I've actually got two suggestions for you. So we publish a bunch of Doctor Who comics at Titan. One of the artists on one of our Doctor Who comics is Italian, and her name is Erin Enrica Angelini, and I think she'd do a great, lovely job with your universe, actually. And the other person is who's what you might be aware of is Charles Vess. I think Charles Vess would do a great job with your work.
Right. Thank you very much.
I could really see him do it. You know, he's illustrated Stardust with Neil Gaiman, and that's a beautiful book. But I think you're nodding heartily, aren't you, Dodd? You can see what I'm saying, can't you?
Yes, yeah, because he's also doing the new Joanne Harris Honeycomb, which I'm super looking forward to. So it's going to look breathtaking.
Oh, he's a genius. He's a genius, but he's got particularly adept with fantasy and certainly some of the themes that you write about. He's really into that stuff.
Amazing. Well, if a comic book adaptation happens, then I'm going to steal your ideas.
Well, happily donated. Anyway, Laura, let's get back into the meat of your questions, pal.
Yeah. So what do you find comes first for you? Is it the character or the setting when you're writing? It's
usually the character. Like I said, the setup is normally that there's an interaction between two people. It's usually tense somehow because, you know, without tension, what story is there? So it's usually tense somehow, and there's something about the interaction I find intriguing. Usually quite an emotional interaction, and so it just always makes me want to know who the two people are interacting. And the setting is kind of that comes later. And it depends on the story and the characters, really. It's a hard process I can't really nail down a sort of two-step for it. But this one came about because they were knights in the dream. And at first I was like, I can't do that. And then I was like, actually, but I'm not necessarily interested in medieval fantasy. I'm a bit more contemporary, and you know, somewhere along the way a lot of my base loves got fused into it. Like I really love Akira because I watched that when I was very young, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if they were on motorbikes? For no reason, I don't know, I was like, that just would look insanely cool. And I didn't want, like, I was trying to veer away from this medieval version of knights. I wanted them to be a little more hard-edged than that. It wasn't about chivalry, or, you know, and necessarily it wasn't this sort of, I didn't want to take that sort of Vulgate cycle romance kind of thing. That wasn't the approach that I wanted at all. But I did love this idea of knights being the sort of dispensers of justice, almost like the police, or one branch of it, that they would be the arms of the government, if you like, and that was their purpose. So yeah, it's character first, and then the setting is just dredged up from all the things that I fell in love with when I was a kid, basically. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean Akira, it was such a shame because it was the kind of anniversary during lockdown, and we were meant to be doing a Akira window with the motorbike,
Rad.
and it just never came to be, and I was so so sad that we never got to. But it's
right. Yeah, just visually. There's a lot of, I mean, you've already said it about it being a good comic book adaptation. This is a very visual book for me, intentionally. So I could see it, and it's supposed to be quite stylized, quite a stylized world. I'm also a fan of Blade Runner, and that sort of strange kind of future cityscape. It's not it's kind of grimy and weird in some ways. It's sort of a weird mix of technology.
It's that kind of fusion of futurism and anachronism, right. which works really well, right? Which is a part of the power of it, I think.
Right.
I think that's really a really well made point, actually.
Yeah. So this is quite a departure from your previous books, though, with the same kind of lyrical style. What were the challenges in writing kind of your first adult fiction novel, and the kind of freedoms, I suppose, within writing adult fantasy?
Yeah, good question. The challenge, I suppose the thing I was most aware of is that I at first made the characters proper adults, quite old, all of them. And actually, the way the timeline goes for one of the main characters, he starts age 17 and he actually goes up to age like 36 or 37. So he does age into an adult. The others are fairly young. There's one who's 18, there's one who's like 23, 24. So I was hyper aware that I was very deliberately trying to write an adult fantasy, but with slightly edging into teenage characters. But that's easier to do when you're in a fantasy world, right? Characters can be younger and yet have more adult concerns to grapple with. Things can be more outre and violent. They can have to deal with things that your average 18-year-old in Northeast London would not necessarily have to deal with. So it matters less, the age. It depends how you present the characters. And so I wanted it, I needed it to not feel YA in that way, I suppose. And then I guess the obvious freedom is you can be more graphic, right? Mm-hmm. So although my previous YAs were, I guess, considered pretty dark, they're quite fade to black. Which is not to say that I wrote this book because I just wanted to write sex scenes. That's not the reason, but it's part of the reason. Just because the two things I'm obsessed with is sex and death, as are we all, and I wanted to write something that was very overtly within that wheelhouse. And if you're writing in a sort of a very violent, sexualized world in which these two things are almost worshipped as a sort of religious fervor, they're front and center of how this culture works, then you can't really shy away from putting that on the page. Otherwise, what are you doing? Why are you even bothering? So this was the wonderful thing about it. I was very clear in my head, no, this is going to be an adult fantasy, so I can do this. So I can just have fun romping within the fields of gratuitous violence and all sorts. So that
good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff, right? So that was very freeing. And another thing I would say is, and this is just a personal opinion, so don't take it as read, but within YA, there is a kind of emphasis on, depending on what you're writing, really, again, you can get away with more in fantasy, but there is an emphasis on, like, you are you are, your work is intended for a younger audience. Therefore, you do have to put a lot more care and attention into what it is you're giving them. So that does mean restrictions in certain ways, and that means that I felt like I had certain attitudes towards human interactions that were maybe not so great to put into YA. Morally grey characters that don't necessarily get punished for it, that kind of thing. So I that was another landscape which I was quite sort of happy to explore in adults. And adult concerns, basically, the sort of intricacies of politics and how you conduct yourself and how things can be quite disappointing and banal, and all of these things that come that don't necessarily fit into a more commercialized YA world where your writing has to be sharp in a different way. You tend to be asked to sort of cut out the extraneous fluff stuff. I'm like, but that's great, and it makes for a sort of tighter experience. But in adult, the extraneous fluff is part of the deal. I kind of want to search around a bit for things to be uncertain.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the start of a duology. So have you got the second book all planned out already?
So I'm drafting it right now. I'm totally going to make that deadline. Absolutely. No, I'm right in the middle of it, and it was in fact quite planned, because in the middle of writing the first book. So the first book is 2 points of view. It alternates between two characters, one named Red, one named Art. And the first draft, when I first started writing it, there was a third point of view, an entirely different character, one called Ghost. And somewhere along the way, I was like, I'm 120,000 words in, and I'm still only about a third of the way through the story. And basically, I had to make a decision of, am I going to basically write, some hideous, huge tome, which I just couldn't face, or am I going to split this up and just take, the easiest thing to do was to take Ghost out of the picture, because I can't talk too much about what she does or who she is, but she's tied into it, but not that much. So I knew actually from the beginning that if this got sold, it would be 2 books, and Ghost would be one of the narratives in the second one. So I already kind of had a good idea about that. So the second book is in fact 2 completely different points of view. One is Ghost, and the other one is a character called Will from the first book. So yeah.
Cool.
Excellent. Laura, we've got I'm so glad you split it in 2, by the way. One of my pet peeves is books that are overly long. Yeah. Just like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wanna do it. I want to be able to be that. I just can't. I can't face it.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. No, brilliant. Yeah. There's something really nice about the process of starting a new book and anticipating it and looking forward to it, and you really enjoyed the first one. I think that transition's a lovely thing, rather than sat with 2,000 pages of telephone directory on your desk.
Well, of course they exist and they do exceptionally well. I like Game of Thrones, right? But it is, I think it's harder for most people to sit with a book for that long. And it's certainly hard for me. It's rare that I finish a book that long. So
yeah. Amen. Couldn't agree more. Laura, we've got time for one more question, mate.
Yes. So what books, films and games have been keeping you kind of occupied during lockdown, and what are you most looking forward to doing when lockdown's all over?
So during lockdown, I briefly got on the baking train, as we all did. That was really good fun. But alas, I live alone, and most of these recipes, they're not exactly a cake for one,
Yeah.
They're for 6, or there are 20 buns or whatever. So
Yeah.
having to eat literally everything I was making. Whilst that theory, it actually made me quite sick. So I had to stop doing that. So I was like, oh, maybe not the baking. But then I lit upon, I'm a big cinephile, and I had been thinking about trying to expand, my, in my view, quite limited palette. And so I made a kind of a project of sort of systematically sitting down and going, right, what's, all of the sort of auteurs that you've never tried, and going all the way back. So I watched this brilliant series on the history of the cinema from its birth, with the Lumiere brothers. I think it's a series by Mark Cousins, the critic. I can't remember what it's called, but if you look it up, you can see. And it's basically everything from then to now. And it really inspired me, and I've decided to start sort of like going back to the sort of the teens and the 20s, 1920s, and sort of work my way through. Which means I've seen some really weird stuff, but it was great. Even if it's a film you don't enjoy, it's still something that's so a little bit out of your remit. So that was what was really keeping me occupied throughout lockdown. I loved doing that. I'm still doing it, although much more ad hoc now. Currently, I'm on a Coen Brothers kind of run.
Excellent. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think the process of watching old films you've not been exposed to before doesn't actually matter if you enjoy them or not. It's the process is fascinating always.
It's an experience, and highly inspiring in different ways, because we all needed something to engage our brains with, going insane, sort of. And I know a lot of people went to the comfort end of the spectrum, and I did do that at first, but it was making me too depressed. There was something really awfully numbing about it, and I already felt kind of weird and numb and disconnected, with the whole, and so I forced myself to go the other way, and I was like, no, you're going to watch stuff that you're going to find you have to engage with actively rather than passively, and that was really good for me. That was the way that I coped, basically. So yeah.
It probably helps fuel some of those dreams / future books as well. So
I mean, I did watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which I don't know if you know that film.
I do, yeah.
German expressionism for the win, right?
Yeah, right on. Absolutely.
I watched it and I was like, oh, this is where, what's his name? Tim Burton. This is where Tim Burton got all his ideas from, isn't it?
Literally all of them. Yeah, no, it's a fact. It's true. Yeah, yeah.
You saw the sort of formative age, didn't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty nightmarish, that one. It's fabulous. Check it out.
And what about the Coen brothers? What's your favorite Coen brothers film that you've seen so far?
So far, that's difficult actually, because they're quite different. They're quite difficult.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I agree.
I saw Raising Arizona, which is basically like a sort of a crazy slapstick, almost cartoonish, starring Nicolas Cage back in the 80s when he had insane hair and laughed like a loon all the time. It was fabulous. He's amazing in it. They went from that to a very sort of the very noirish Miller's Crossing.
Oh yeah, great film.
Game. A period piece, and very sort of very noir, very crime noir, and not at all slapstick, and played very much straight. So it's difficult to compare them. Probably the one that I enjoy the most, just because the dialogue is so endlessly fabulous, is The Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
But I do have a couple more to go, and I haven't seen a couple of their more recent films. I think what's the one with George Clooney?
Yeah, absolutely. The name escapes me for the time being. It's the one set in the movie studio.
Yes.
That's definitely
Hail Caesar.
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, it's so good.
It's great.
God, yes,
it's great.
Yeah,
it's good. I mean, the ones in name checked are awesome and so very different. You can't beat the lunatic energy of Raising Arizona, though. It's something else, I think.
Yeah. Nicolas Cage. I mean, Nicolas Cage in the 80s was just. Have you seen Moonstruck?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
wonderful,
so lovely, and actually, given the fact that you have these the hyper irreality of his performance, his romance is actually very real, you know, and that's what I love about it.
Very sweet natured,
Yes.
romantic lead. It's weird. And you couldn't think of a more incongruous pairing than Cher and Nicholas.
Right. Yeah.
Somehow it's, you know, it's probably the most romantic pairing I've seen on screen, in fact. It's delightful.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It is deeply romantic. And on that note, because actually we've charged through our time limit for the interview, sadly, Laure, that's because you've given up such interesting stuff. But actually, Laura didn't ask the one question I wanted her to ask. Is,
okay, you go.
Can you ride a motorcycle?
Yes.
I'm so going to disappoint you. I cannot at all ride a motorcycle.
Ah, man. I thought with the Akira connection, I thought we were heading towards yes then.
I mean, my one true dream is to ride a motorcycle with a giant sword, obviously. You know, I haven't realised it yet. So,
well, on that brilliant cliffhanger and roadmap, in fact, for the future, I'm Andrew Sumner, this is Laure Dodd, and we have been talking to the brilliant Laure Eve about her an excellent new book, Blackheart Knights, which you can order from the links attached to this interview. Thanks so much for joining us today, mate. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and likewise.
Take care. Bye-bye. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.